For Bob Martin, the road to a political career has been a rocky one. Yesterday he occupied this spacious Mayfield office as the sitting member for Port Stephens. Today he was relegated to a park bench after having been dismissed. In a landmark decision yesterday, the Court of Disputed Returns found him guilty of bribery, saying he'd procured funds for several community groups in the lead-up to the March 19 election in an attempt to influence votes. Although Justice Needham emphasised he did not consider Mr Martin corrupt and the bribery in this case did not mean what is normally understood by the criminal offence, Attorney-General John Dowd is still unsure and has placed the matter in the hands of the Crown Solicitor. And Newcastle Solicitor Reg Mitchell admits the finding could well see politicians drastically change their ways.
It certainly means that people are going to have to be aware of the fact that if one party is in a position to actually offer money within an electorate shortly before the date of the election and the other party is out in the cold, which of course will always be the case, then the party who's got the power to give money away should exercise it with great restraint.
But certainly the decision hasn't altered the aspirations of several political hopefuls. Already 4 have indicated they're considering running in the by-election. Mr Martin, Liberal Bob Scott, who filed the bribery complaint, and Independents Bruce Mackenzie and George Perrin, though certainly Mr Martin has a head start on them all. From his ringside park bench seat, he was able to tackle the people of Nelson Bay about his campaign this afternoon, seemingly unperturbed by the huge blow yesterday dealt to his political career.
A bit like being bowled an underarm ball and going out LBW, knocked out on a technicality, and I'm the victim, so we're up and at it.
So, gauging by today's reaction, do you think that you've got a chance when the by-election's held?
I think the people are going to be showing how unhappy they are with the Greiner government's promises and where we're going.
Though it seems his confidence isn't echoed amongst ALP officials. Reports today claim they've called in the Labor campaigning big guns to advise Mr Martin to ensure he doesn't suffer too many more setbacks. And while Mr Martin insists with the people he spoke with today he had unanimous support, it appears with some at least, the campaigners might have their work cut out for them.
Northern New South Wales continued their unbeaten run with a 1-1 draw with the South Australians. 7 of the 18 players in the Northern New South Wales squad are from Newcastle and 2 play on the Central Coast. Playing in the midfield is Sharon Dewar from Gosford, who competed with the Australian team at the World Championships in China earlier this year. But today's performance was a team effort. Down 1-0 at half-time after a goal from Andrea Sandrak for the South Australians, the locals fought back with an equaliser from Lindy Hughes to save the match. In other matches, New South Wales defeated Western Australia 7-1, ACT had a 3-3 draw with Victoria, and South Queensland easily beat Tasmania 5-0. Northern New South Wales play New South Wales tomorrow at Tube Maker Ovals in what looks like the game of the championships, as both teams are undefeated.
For the past week, the world's biggest tent and the world's biggest transportable ice rink have dominated the Newcastle showground. Now also in town, the world's biggest names in ice skating, Torvill and Dean. For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
About 60 members of the Newcastle University Staff Association met on campus today to discuss amalgamation. The procedure for amalgamation has been set out in a Heads of Agreement document, which went before the Hunter Institute Council this afternoon and will be presented to the University Council on Monday. Staff Association members say the Heads of Agreement document should specify that the name of the consolidated institution will remain the University of Newcastle. They also want no involuntary retrenchments as a result of amalgamation and no loss nor gain in salary or formal status for any member of the academic staff of the university or the institute. In this context, the association says it should be acknowledged that a professional rank does not exist in the Hunter Institute. A motion was also passed opposing any attempt to repeal the University of Newcastle Act. Association President Robert Mackey says it's feared a blueprint for user pay education in the Hunter Valley could replace it, and Hunter Institute union members will be asked to support the association in its opposition. Mr Mackey says there's a high level of anxiety about the speed of amalgamation and says it will reduce the choice and diversity of post-school education. Belinda Borissow reporting for NBN News.
To the ordinary traveller along Elizabeth Street, Carrington, this new entrance to the Port Waratah coal loader, 200 metres east of the Hannell Street roundabout, may look like a bit of fancy window dressing. In fact, it's a $2 million investment which has increased coal receival capacity at the loader by 20%. When the loader complex was built 12 years ago, coal trains had just 42 wagons. Now that number's been doubled. While this makes rail receival at the terminal more efficient, the 10% of coal moved in by road transport would have suffered long delays waiting at a crossing while trains cleared the way. $1 million of the $2 million went into this double-span bridge, which provides trucks with unimpeded access to the dumping area. 400 loads a day can now be delivered, amounting to 10 kilotons. Still well behind rail, 70 kilotons a day, but a necessary adjunct to keep supply up to demand. Even so, the port's loading capacity of 43 megatons a year is well in excess of the present throughput, a point taken up by Mineral Resources Minister Neil Pickard when he called on unions to match the state government in showing commitment to the mining industry.
But the New South Wales industry today remains in crisis. I hope to see that in the next few weeks that will be settling down, and that we in the industry, all of us, from the pit right to the port, we are bound together in order to give each a fair share of the rewards that come from this industry, but to make sure that we get the markets because we can produce at a cost that the world economy is setting for us.
Okay, and Mr Pickard then cut a ribbon stretched across the road, signifying its official opening, and the trucks began to roll. While the area presently resembles its industrial surroundings, 4,000 trees have been planted, along with grass and other ground cover. The company hopes its private road will soon be forest-lined, rivaling the best botanical area around.
been relatively
20 student police officers from the Goulburn Academy arrived today to spend a fortnight with regular police seeing how it's done. Don't let the uniforms fool you, these are raw recruits, only 8 weeks into basic training.
Police Minister Ted Pickering inspected the novices during his visit this morning. He says it's important that the public know the difference between the cadets and the regulars. Pale blue hatbands and epaulettes should do the trick. It's also worth noting that they don't carry sidearms. Mr Pickering says the work experience course is part of a radical change to police training.
Because society is a far more complicated society today, police officers have to be far better trained to cope. I mean, we expect police officers to make a decision in a split second, then allow a court to spend months deciding whether the officer made the right decision.
The cadets will spend most of their time in stations at Wallsend, Belmont and Newcastle as observers before returning to the academy for another 14 weeks. After that, they'll spend another 4 months at police stations around the state before returning to Goulburn to formally graduate.
For months, the Regional Museum has been criticised for failing to interest Novocastrians. After an initial burst of enthusiasm in May and June, attendance figures have slumped and are not improving. The souvenir shop and kiosk were closed because of a lack of business. However, the kiosk has since been reopened. Weekly attendances now fluctuate wildly, but average around 600 visitors. According to Lord Mayor John McNaughton, the museum is being dragged down by its neighbours.
The thing that lets that down is the old and rather nondescript buildings along Stewart Avenue and around into Hunter Street. And they need to be brought up to a standard by either refurbishing or removal and reconstruction that meets the rest of that precinct.
Purchasing these properties is a goal for Alderman McNaughton, who wants the museum block to become a focal point of the city. Among other possibilities, the council is considering building a cultural centre next to the museum, which would house part or all of the regional art gallery. However, this plan is expensive. The council has already purchased 3 of the old warehouses in the centre of the block, but the Hunter Street and Stewart Avenue properties have been valued at around $1 million. The council says publicity surrounding the sale could double those prices. However, according to Alderman McNaughton, the council is in no hurry and the purchases could take 5 or 10 years. It is, he says, part of a long-term attempt to improve the western end of the CBD. Rosshampton for NBN News.
Recent rain has swollen the Mako River, the current is strong and the water murky. Early this morning, searchers still held a glimmer of hope that the missing woman could have struggled ashore, but as the hours passed, that optimism disappeared.
I think we hold very, very high chances of her being found alive. We are treating it as a drowning at this stage.
The cruiser was hired for 3 days, but now it's back at Tea Gardens bearing silent testimony to a holiday which became a nightmare. It's understood the couple's 2.5-year-old daughter fell overboard through an open gate in the rear transom at about 6:30 p.m. The 33-year-old mother, who was not a strong swimmer, left her 5-year-old son on board and dived in after the infant. She was followed moments later by her 35-year-old husband. He saved the little girl, putting her in the boat's dinghy. The mother disappeared without trace. Hire boat operator Peter Watson says the family had been carefully briefed on safety.
On the vessel, all safety equipment is installed to Maritime Service Board regulation. There are life jackets installed in the rear cabin. There are also life jackets up on the flybridge. There are life rings on the roof. And there are also a dinghy out the back, of course, and as I tell every person who goes out, that there is a radio there to call in case of any emergency.
Police searchers were assisted by Polair and a team of divers from Sydney. Meanwhile, water police at the popular holiday destination are urging visitors to let the incident serve as a reminder of how quickly a moment's inattention on the water can lead to tragedy. I'm Tom Hilston for NBN News. Lord Mayor of Newcastle, Alderman John McNaughton, officially announced the city would be hosting the Rig of the Year Awards after talks with organisers this morning. Since it started 5 years ago, the Rig of the Year contest has become a national institution for truckies. Last year, Adelaide hosted the spectacular street parade, which will be repeated in Newcastle on December the 11th. Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne have also hosted the event. This is the first time a regional centre has won the honour. The event is sponsored by Truck and Life magazine. Editor Bruce Honeywell inspected the harbour foreshore venue before pronouncing Newcastle an ideal location.
There are a lot of trucks working out of Newcastle, and is it going where the trucks are? But of course the venue is great, and the City Council here has been, since the first suggestion, been totally behind the concept. So it's been fairly easy to date. Yeah.
Each month the magazine names a top rig and the 12 finalists are then judged. The rig of the year receives a $5,000 prize. Obviously the purse only goes a small way towards the total cost of all that lavish decoration. Bruce Honeywell stoutly defends the contest against cynics who say it seems that truckies aren't quite as badly off as their numerous protests suggest.
These actual vehicles reflect that a lot of people are doing quite well on the road. Yeah, for sure, there's a percentage on the road that are doing it hard at present. But still, every week there's a lot of blokes running up and down, and they're doing very well for themselves.
Bowman and Clement in an earlier game. Let's see what Clement can do this time. She gets the shot in and it's saved on the line. And a second time penalty stroke. She scored! Australia lead 1-0. And that was a beautifully taken stroke. And she is delirious. She is ecstatic, Debbie Bowman. And now...
The small township of Fingal Bay has remained relatively untouched by the rapid growth of its close neighbour Nelson Bay, principally because the town is only accessible via Nelson Bay. For decades, the idea of a road linking Fingal Bay with Anna Bay has been on the books. Now it looks like becoming a reality.
Well, it will provide a relief for the traffic congestion that occurs in Nelson Bay and has been for some years. Provide an opportunity for people to appreciate the beauty of the area. Will get worse.
The idea brings a mixed response from Fingal Bay residents.
Should have been done years ago, I think.
Others are afraid of losing the quiet character of the village or fear the road will have an impact on native bush. First step for the council was to convince Environment Minister Tim Moore that the road was needed. He was taken on a four-wheel drive inspection of two routes selected by the council. The minister, however, wasn't the only one the council had to convince. One suggested route cuts through the Tomaree National Park. According to the National Parks and Wildlife Service, that is out of the question. The second council option runs through a waterboard catchment area, a proposal the Water Board has rejected. The Environment Minister eventually decided both arguments were valid.
Well, I'm happy to have the council, I think, go ahead after today. We're looking at not only the two options that they brought me up here to have a look at, but a third one which has been identified from the ground inspection today, which also should be examined, which won't cause problems apparently for either the National Park Service or the Hunter District Water Board.
So as far as you're concerned, it should be able to go ahead in the near future?
Well, the study can go ahead.
Good, fast, open football has been the order of the 2 days of play so far. The only controversy has been the disqualification of the Narwin team from Armidale. The 1986 state champions were barred from competition for not paying the prescribed team entry fee. Again, matches were played at Toronto and the No. 2 sports ground. In this game, Moree Boomerangs beat the ACT 22-10, despite being down 10-4 early in the second half. The current champions Newcastle scored an easy 58-2 win in yesterday's round over Newcastle No. 3. This morning in their second round match, they came up against Gilgandra Brothers. After two penalty goals late in the first half, Gilgandra went to the break leading 4-0. But less than 60 seconds into the second half, Newcastle scored the first try of the game and went on from there to win 16-4. The semi-finals and final will be played tomorrow at the No. 2 sports ground, with the final set down for 1 p.m. It's been a long time between drinks for the two teams, which haven't crossed each other's paths for 25 years. The Ken Kaiser coached Northern New South Wales were by far the better team in the opening minutes, but it was to be a Tasmanian who would score the first goal. In the 7th minute, Devils captain Stephen Canageiser scored from a deflected header to the far post. This goal seemed to boost the confidence of the Tasmanians, who picked up their game to go to the half-time break, leading 1-0. But the temperature in the high 20s playing in this afternoon's final was no place for the faint-hearted or the unfit. To make it even worse for Walgett and Newcastle, they had already played in a semi-final this morning. Whereas the preliminary games were 20 minutes each way, the final was 40-minute halves. While Newcastle was confident of winning back-to-back titles, it wasn't to be, as Walgett's all-round strength proved too much for the All Blacks. Bertie Gordon scored Walgett's first try after Newcastle dropped the ball close to their line. Gordon was one of 4 Sydney first graders lining up for Walgett, which also included Ricky Walford, Wilfred Williams and Brad Webb. As well, the team boasted 4 Western Division reps. The best try of the match was scored by Walgett captain Bull Dennis after some great anticipation passes and backing up. Newcastle did get a try on the board just prior to half-time through Wally Gibson, but it went to the break, trailing 28-6.
The introduction of the federal government initiative Skillshare. The main objective of the evening is to recognise the value of...
The Lambton Fire Brigade was first on the scene after being called out just after 2 o'clock. They arrived to find a section of bushland at the rear of Rankin Park Hospital well alight. With strong northwesterly winds behind the blaze, it quickly raced through the area, and reinforcements in the form of 2 more tankers were called in. As the fire gained momentum, fears were held for several homes in Lookout Road, with the fire heading directly towards them. But firemen were at last able to contain the blaze and avert any loss of property. The smoke, meanwhile, was playing havoc with traffic, with motorists in surrounding roads having to slow to crawl pace to pass safely through the thick blanket. Police were later called in and were forced to close a section of Lookout Road for a short while. Meanwhile, Newcastle Fire Control reported a spate of fires across the region, with teams being sent out from Gosford to Taree and right out to Singleton. It's all a result of the heat wave which hit the Hunter today, sending the mercury soaring as high as 35 degrees. Along the beaches, many folk attempted to seek relief from the heat with a quick dip, but found themselves victim to the strong winds which whipped the sands. It's those very winds that in fact has produced the hot weather, bringing conditions normally experienced in Central Australia to us in the east. And it appears there won't be any relief for at least a day or two, with only slightly milder conditions tomorrow, and then more hot days right through to Friday.